In this lecture, I will show how to enter command in Python. When your code has a few lines, you may not need any explanation. However, when you work for a company or when you implement some complex software or any other reason, you better enter commands in your code, which will simply explain the code. The commented parts will be ignored. In order to enter command, you can simply use #. The part which is entered after # in the line will be command, and that commented part will be ignored. These are the samples to enter command. Let's enter a code using print function. Enter a string value, let's say first. In the following line, enter #. Next, type print. When we run this code, second will not be displayed on the screen. In the following line, let me say print third, and after the print function, let me use #, and let me say command. In this line, the code part which is entered after the # will be ignored. This message will be displayed on the screen because this part is not ignored and it is entered before the # in this line. However, this part will be ignored. Let me save and run this code. As you can see from the output, the parts in the lines which are entered after # are ignored. So, first and third are displayed on the screen. Hello. In this lecture, we will start coding with Python. For the first example, we are going to display a message on the screen saying, "Start coding with Python." First, open a new file, go to File menu, click on New File. In Python, you can simply use print function in order to display the data on the screen. In the first example, we will be using print function. Between the parentheses of print function, you have to enter the data to be displayed on the screen. If you directly enter a text within the parentheses, I mean, if you directly enter a string within the parentheses, it has to be framed with quotation marks. Within the quotation marks, I will enter the text. As you can see here, the message is framed with quotation marks, and we entered it within the parentheses of the print function. It is that simple. Now, we can save and run this code. In order to save it, go to File menu, click on Save. Now, I need to enter the file name. Let's name it as display message. When you name, you can use underscore. At the end, I'm going to add .py in order to indicate that it's a Python code. Click on Save. Now we can run it. Go to Run menu. Click on Run module. That's it. The message is displayed on the screen. We have already started using variables in Python. We already saw that when you assign a value to the variable, the interpreter automatically allocates some space for the variable in the memory. But there are some rules which apply for the variables in Python. In the following tutorial, I provided a reference document on naming rules and naming convention in Python. However, I will also explain some of these rules in this video lecture. First of all, in Python, case matters for identifier names, which means it is case sensitive. Let me show that in this example. Let's say we have a variable which is named number. All the letters are lowercase. I assign a value to this variable. Let's assign 1. If I want to display the value which is assigned to this variable by using print function, I have to enter this variable name exactly the same as a parameter for print function. If I save and run this code, I will not have any problem, and the value which is assigned to number will be displayed on the screen. Let me do that. File, save, run module. As expected, the value which is assigned to number is displayed on the screen. Please note that here all the letters are lowercase letters. What was the first rule? In Python, case matters for identifier names. If I change one of the letters in this variable name, we will have problem when we run this code. Let me change lowercase e to uppercase E. If I run this code, Python will claim that this variable is not defined, and we will get name error. File, save as, rules2.py, save, run module. As expected, we got name error. Python claims that name, number, which is with uppercase letter E, is not defined. Let's fix this problem. Let me change capital E to small e, save it again. File, save, run module. The value, which is assigned to number, is displayed on the screen. Please note that for both of them, we used only lowercase letters. Identifier names start with a letter or underscore, and it has to continue with a letter or underscore or digit. Let's start with letter. Let's say number. We started with letter and we continued with letters as well. We can also continue with underscore. We can also continue with digit. Let me assign a value to this variable. This naming is valid. We can also display its value on the screen. That's it. While naming the identifiers, we can also start with underscore. Number 2. We started with underscore. We continued with letters and digit. We can also enter underscore here. It will be fine. Let's assign a value to this variable. Similarly, display its value on the screen by using print function. When we save and run this code, the values which are assigned to these variables will be displayed on the screen. Save and run this code. Rules y. As expected, the values are displayed on the screen. It worked fine because both of the variables are named correctly based on the rule. Question. Identifier names start with a letter or underscore, and it has to continue with a letter or underscore or digit. What happens if the first is digit? If another variable name includes question mark. So based on the rule, this is invalid. Both of the variables are named incorrectly, we will get error message. As expected, we got error message which says invalid syntax. For this variable name, we have got invalid syntax error. Let's remove this one. Save and run it again. We got another invalid syntax. Okay, let me fix it again. We got another invalid syntax error because of this variable name. What happens if I remove question mark from here and here? Save and run this code. It should work right now because we fixed the errors. Now it works fine. In conclusion for this rule, the identifier name should start with a letter or it can start with underscore. It has to continue with a letter or underscore or digit. If it doesn't match with this rule, the name of the variable will be invalid. When we run the code, we will get error message. The reserved words should not be used to name any variable or any kind of identifier. Reserved words for Python version 2 and Python version 3 are a bit different. In this example, I will make very simple mistake. I will enter a reserved word as a variable name. Here, choose one reserved word. Let's use finally is equal to 1, and I will try to display its value on the screen. When I run this code, we are going to get error message because we tried to use a reserved word as a variable name. In conclusion, when we use the variables or identifiers, or when we name the identifiers, we have to remember three basic rules. First of all, in Python, case matters for identifier names, so it is case sensitive. Secondly, identifier names should start with a letter or underscore. Letter could be a capital or a small letter. It has to continue with letter, underscore, or digit. Finally, the reserved words should not be used to name any variable or any kind of identifier. In this lecture, we will cover an example using parent function. Instead of directly using the values as parameter, we are going to use variables as parameter. The use of variables in Python is easier than the use of variables in some other language. Let's see that in this example. Let's say message1 is equal to a string value hello. Let's enter another variable. Let's name it as number1. I will assign a numeric value, let's say 9. Let me clarify it. We have two variables which are message1 and number1. We did not specify if they will get numeric or string values. For message1, I assigned a string value which is hello. And for number1, I assigned an integer value which is 9. Instead of directly using the values as a parameter for parent function, I will use variables as parameter. Let's see the result. Save, run module. As expected, the values of the variables which are named message1 and number1 are displayed on the screen. Another composite or sequential data type is dictionary. We use dictionaries if we need to access the values by using the specific keys. The main difference of dictionaries from the previous types is that you can use any type of unique key value. To create a dictionary, you have to first enter the dictionary name and you have to assign the key value pairs which are written between the curly brackets. Here is the example for dictionary. As seen here, value which is related to this key is accessed and displayed on the screen. In this lecture, I will introduce lists in Python. By using lists, we can store multiple members. In order to enter the members, we have to enter these members within the brackets. Let me show that in this example. I will first enter a list name, which will be, let's say, sample. And let's enter the members for this list. So I will enter the members within the brackets. The first member will be 1. Let's say the second member to be Python, and third member to be 0, and the last member to be 5. So it is that simple. So we enter the list, and these are the members of the list. All the members are separated by comma. Now, let's display it on the screen first by using parent function. So the list name was sample. Let's display its type on the screen as well. So I will use parent function again. Next, I will use type. and then I have to type sample. So let's do that. File, save. Let's name it as list1.py. Save, run module. As you can see here, we displayed it and its type on the screen. The type of sample is displayed as list. So these are the expected results. Let's continue. Before I start this part, I would like to say that lists are mutable, so we can modify the lists. So it is very important. It can be an interview question. Because of that, please keep this in your mind. I will first access the members of the list by using index numbers. So you already know how to use index numbers. In order to access a member of a list by using index number, you need to first enter list name. Within the brackets, you have to enter the index number. It was a bit different for the strings. However, it is similar. So if you want to access a member of a list by using index number, you have to first enter the list name. Within the brackets, you have to enter the index number. So here, index number 0.1, index number 1 points Python, index number 2 points 0, index number 3 points 5. If you use negative index number -1 points 5, index number -2 points 0, index number -3 points Python, index number -4 points 1. By using print function, I will display some members by accessing them via index numbers. So in order to access a member by using index number, I have to first enter the list name, which is sample. Within the brackets, I have to enter the index number. So let's say 0. Now let's display a member which is pointed by -2. So here we are going to display a member of the list which is pointed by index number 0, and here we are going to display another member which is pointed by index number -2. Let's do that. File, save as. I will name it as list2.py. Save, run module. So index number 0 points 1, and we displayed it on the screen. Index number -2 points 0, which is here, -1 points 5, -2 points 0, and we displayed it on the screen. We can also modify the members of the list. So in order to do that, we can access that member by using index number. So let's modify the member which is pointed by index number 0. So I will enter 0 within the brackets. So I first enter the list name within the brackets. I enter the index number which points the member which I'm gonna modify, so which is 1. Instead of integer value, I will enter, let's enter a list for that. Why not? So within the brackets, I will enter 5. So it will be that simple. And when we display the member which is pointed by index number 0, we are going to display 5 within the brackets. Let's modify another member which is pointed by index number -2. For that, I have to enter the list name first, and within the brackets, I have to enter the index number which is -2, and let's say it is a string value which is Python or learn Python. Let's save it with different names. Save as list3.py. Save and run module. As you can see from the result on the screen, we modified the list. So the new member, which is pointed by index number 0, is 5 within the brackets. And another new member, which is pointed by index number -2, is learn Python. Let me show you one more thing here. I want to show the type of these members as well. Let's say, okay, here I'm going to display the type of sample0 on the screen. Let's do the same thing for another member, which is pointed by index number -2. So parent. Next, you have to enter the type function, and I enter sample within the brackets -2. So this is kind of parameter for type function, and this is a parameter for print function. Let's save as list4.py, run. After the modification, the type of the member, which is pointed by index number 0, is list, and the type of the member, which is pointed by index number -2, is string. This is enough for introduction. In the following lectures, we will cover more about lists in Python. This is the end of the lecture. Thanks for watching. In this lecture, I will introduce integers and floating point numbers. The first example will be on integers, and the second example will be on floating point numbers. We already used integers in the previous examples. In this example, let me enter two variables which are named number1 and number2. Let's say number1 is equal to 19 and number2 is equal to -84. First, learn the type of the variable. So I have to first type, and I have to enter number1 as a parameter for type. In order to display it on the screen, I will enter whole part as a parameter for print function. Let's do the same thing for number2. When we save and run this code, the type for both of number1 and number2 will be displayed as integer. Save, run module. Although we didn't explicitly indicate the type of number1 and number2, but since we assigned integer values to these variables, their types are displayed as integer on the screen. In Python, real numbers with decimal point are represented by floating point numbers. Let's see what happens if we enter real numbers with decimal point for number1 and number2. After we save and run this code, the type of number1 and number2 will be displayed as float. Run. As expected, the type are displayed as float because we entered floating point numbers to both of these variables. I will introduce 5 standard types in Python. The types I will introduce in this section are numeric types, string, tuple, list, and dictionary. For numeric types, I will introduce integers and floating point numbers. When integer is mentioned, you have to remember that integers do not have decimal point. When floating point number is mentioned, you have to remember that it represents real number with decimal point. A string will remind you a sequence of characters. Tuples can also be called as tuple sometimes. However, I call it as tuple. Tuples are immutable and they store multiple members. Lists can remind you arrays in C++, C#, or Java, and lists are mutable. They also store multiple members. A dictionary consists of key-value pairs. So in order to access the data, we are going to use the corresponding key. When we cover tuple, list, and dictionary, you will understand these types better. In this lecture, I will introduce strings in Python. In Python, in order to store and process textual data, we will use strings. So, we are going to use string type in order to store and process textual data. When you enter string values, they must be framed with single quote, double quote, or triple quote. If you use triple quotes, I would like to tell you two important things. First of all, you have to start and use the same type of quotation mark, which means that if you started with single quotation mark, you have to continue with single quotation mark. If you started with double quotation mark, you have to continue with double quotation mark. Or you can say it like, if you started with single quote, you have to continue with single quote. If you started with double quote, you have to continue with double quote. That's it. Also, with triple quotes, you can enter multi-line strings. When we cover this lecture, you will understand everything better. Let's enter a variable, let's say sample1, and let's assign a string value to this variable. By using single quote, I will enter a string value. So let's say this is an example. Now we assigned a string value to sample1 and we entered string value is framed with single quotes. It is that simple. Let's display this value on the screen by using print function. And let's display its type on the screen as well. So we will use type function and sample1, which is the variable name. It's a parameter for type function. And by using print function, let's display it on the screen. Okay. As expected, the string value which we assign to sample1 is displayed on the screen, and as expected, the type of sample1 is displayed as string on the screen. In conclusion, for this part, we can enter string values by using single quote. In the first line, I entered a variable and I assigned a string value to this variable. While entering this string value, I framed it with double quotes. The expected result is that the value, which is string value, which we assign to sample2, will be displayed on the screen, and finally, the type of sample2 will be displayed on the screen as string. As expected, the value which we assign to sample2 is displayed on the screen. Next, the type of sample2 is displayed as string. In conclusion, for this part, we can say that we can enter string values by framing them with double quotes. I will frame this string value with triple single quotes. So I started with single quote and I continue with single quotes. Please don't forget this. This is very important. In the following line, I display the value which we assign to sample3, and finally, I display the type of sample3 on the screen. Let's do that. So, the value which we assign to sample3 is displayed on the screen, and the type of sample3 is displayed as string. Here we are going to use triple double quote. And let's name this variable as sample4 for this example. It doesn't matter what variable name we use in this example. However, I don't want to confuse you with the same variable name in this lecture. So instead of single quotes, here we can enter triple double quotes. If I start with double quote, I have to continue with double quotes. So you see the problem. So now it's okay. I started with double quote and I continue with double quote. That's it. In the following line, we are going to display the value which we assign to sample4. And finally, we are going to display the type of sample4 on the screen. Let's do that. So we display the value which we assign to sample4 on the screen. And finally, the type of sample4 is displayed as string on the screen. When you started with double quote, you have to continue with double quote. If you started with single quote, you have to continue with single quote. Now I am going to change one of these quotes to single quote in order to show you the problem. Even though if you change the symmetric one for the same, you are going to have problem again. Let me show that. Let's try to run it. Run module. So we got error message which says syntax error, invalid syntax. As you can see that If you use triple quote, you have to use the same type of quotation mark. In order to fix this problem, you can make all of them double quotes or single quotes. With triple quotes, you can enter multi-line strings, which means that I can make this string multi-line. And this is, let's say this is another, and let's make it multi-line string as well. Let's make it triple. Why not? That's it. If I run this code, if I save and run this code, we will see the output as we entered. So we entered the value as multi-line string. So the output will be the multi-line as well. Let me show that. As you can see, it is displayed how we entered. So we entered sample 6 in 2 lines. So it is displayed in 2 lines. And we entered sample 7 in 3 lines. It is displayed in 3 lines. That's it.
Tuples are similar to the lists, however there are two major differences. First, when we define tuples, we don't use brackets. And second, tuples are immutable, so we cannot modify its members. By using tuples, we can also store multiple members, and we can also access the members of tuple by using the indices. To access the member, the formula is almost the same again. We have to put the tuple name first, and we have to put the index number between the brackets. This line simply displays the first member of the tuple, and this line simply displays the last member of this tuple. We got the expected results. We got error message says tuple object does not support item assignment.